Now, FlutterFlow is always innovating and always releasing new features and new functionality. And over the past couple of weeks, they've made a lot of changes to the app and they released a lot of very, very interesting features. Some are major, some are relatively minor, and others are absolute game changers. And so to save you time in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my 7 favorite new features from FlutterFlow. And for each feature, I'm going to be covering some tips and tricks, some best practices, and also giving you my personal opinion as to how you should use the feature to its full capability. Now, before we get started, as always, the app that I'm going to be building and demonstrating in today's video, well, you can view and or clone this exact app from my Patreon page, and you can learn more about our amazing Patreon community using the link just below the video. Now, the first feature I want to show you is the feature that I believe has been marketed the most. And this is the feature that I've been really pushing lately. And that is AI generation. So if you click on this button here, you have this dialog box, okay? And so you can generate a page with a prompt, okay? So for instance, I can type something like a detailed page for a fitness class with an image, instructor name, and description, okay? And we click on generate, we wait a few moments, all right? And we have a page here generated, okay? So this is the preview of the page. Here's the image, here's the name, this is description, and we also have some more things here, as well as a couple of more details that I did not specify, but it felt they can be useful to this specific page in the niche that I talked about, which is fitness or workout app, okay? And so I have a couple of things that I can change. So I can click here and I can change the theme, kind of the font face and how the page looks. I can click here and I can kind of customize it a little bit, right? I can change here, click here, and by hovering over, I can kind of see what the page is going to be like, right? I can see the theme, I can see the fonts that are going to be used for headers, for body font, the colors, etc., right? So let's say I like this one. This looks nice. I can just leave it there. And I can look at the code here, or here I can regenerate the images. And here I can tell the AI whether I like this page, you know, I'm okay with this page, or I don't like this page, okay? And here I can regenerate the page. And right now you're only allowed 5 page generations per day, so use them wisely. Now, if I like this page, I can simply click on Insert Page, create this page, give it a name. So let's say test, create page, give it the rating. Let's say I liked it. And I have this page here inserted as one of my pages in the app. Now, this AI generation isn't just limited to pages. It's all throughout the app, and especially it's useful when it comes to designing schema. So if you head over to Firestore, and I have here basic users collection, but let's say I want to add a new collection. So let's say I want to call this collection products, okay? Create. And here again, I have 3 options, right? I can choose a template collection. And in fact, there is a products there. I can start from scratch, or I can generate with AI. So if I click here, I can say, you know, a list of products, product name, category, and price. Okay, so something like this, press enter and wait for it to be generated. And in fact, this is a lot faster as compared to generating pages. Okay, so here's my products, and here's the product name, category, price. It gives me the data types, and I can also delete them if I don't like them. Let's say I don't want price in there. I can just delete this field here. And if I'm happy with the way it looks, I can just click on insert, and we've just inserted this schema here under products. Okay, so we have products and product. It's actually interesting that it decided to put it under products. Okay, so not as a top collection, but kind of a sub collection, when in fact I was envisioning it to be a top level collection. But that is a minor point. The fact of the matter is that we were able to go from a mere prompt to a schema that we can start using in our app. Now, to be absolutely honest with you, I'm kind of mixed about this functionality because as far as I'm concerned, this is a no-code builder, so it's relatively easy to design this page by hand. And in fact, when you just learn the basics of design and layout and how you can align different elements, it's going to take you just like a couple of minutes to design any kind of page that you want, whether it's a, it's a simple page or a little bit of a more complex page. And I can also say the same thing when it comes to designing schemas with a prompt. As far as I'm concerned, after you've done it a couple of times, it becomes almost automatic. And so for me personally, it's a lot easier to build a page manually as well as build out the schema manually. I'm actually very, very curious if most people think about this feature the same way I do, or are you guys super excited about it and are going to be using it from now on? Now, the next feature is a relatively minor feature, but if you've been building apps with FlutterFlow for as long as I have, you're definitely going to notice the value in this feature. So here I have a page, and the way I have a design is I have a bunch of rows and I have text inside the row. Okay, so we have this kind of parent-child relationship. You have a bunch of widgets, they have children, etc., etc. And so sometimes I realize that I don't really need this parent widget here. And so what I usually end up doing is I move this text up and then I delete this row because it's not doing anything anymore. So I'm going to press delete. Okay. Now, while that's nice, FlutterFlow has released a feature that allows you to do all that a lot quicker and a lot easier. And so if we undo all the changes and you want to remove the row without removing the text, all you need to do is right click on the row and you can click on remove widget. So if I click on remove widget, and it does the exact same thing in one go that previously took me several steps to do. And so I really, really like this feature. And you guys got to realize that most of the time, your UI is going to be a lot more complex, a lot more complicated than what I have here. So you're going to have tons of widgets, tons of children, and just being able to remove the parent without removing its children is an amazing feature. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be using that feature all the time. And if you're planning on building lots of apps with FlutterFlow, or you've been building lots of apps with FlutterFlow, you will definitely appreciate that minor feature that's going to save you a ton of time and a ton of hassle as well. Now, for the next feature, let me first show you an app I built. So here I have a very, very simple app that when you press go, it shows you a status. It shows you something that's happening. So let's go ahead and run the app so that you can see what's happening. All right, so here's the app. And if I press go, you're going to see a status bar, which is a series of dots here. You also see the iteration, and it's going to continue until it hits 10. Okay, so when it hits 10, it shows you this snack bar here. Okay. So it's a really nice flow. And if we click on go here, you can see what the flow looks like. Okay, so we have this periodic action, you have all of these things, and then you have a snack bar. Now, let's say this snack bar part, I want to reuse that in a lot of other actions. Okay, so maybe right now it's a snack bar. Later on, I might have a couple of things that happening there. But regardless, I want to reuse this part all over the place. Okay. Well, in that case, what I can do is I can create an action block, which is going to allow me to reuse a series of actions all across my app, or you can do it on a page level as well. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this action here. I'm going to click here and I'm going to create an action block on an app level. Okay. So I'm going to click create and I'm going to call it snack bar. Okay. I'm going to click create. Here, I'm going to paste my action. And so right now I've defined an action block with one action here, okay? But the real beauty of action blocks is you can customize them by passing parameters, okay? Just like with function. And so if I come over here, I can add a parameter. So for instance, this snack bar, I want to say hello something, maybe the person's name or maybe something else. So in that case, I can add a parameter and I can say the parameter is name, okay? And once I define this parameter here, I can now reference it everywhere inside of this action block. So I can come here and let's say I don't want to say something generic like done. I want to say something customized. I want to have a customized message. So I'm going to click here, search for combined text, and I'm going to say it's done. And then I can add a text. And here I want to display that parameter. Okay, so in that case, I can click here, and now we have this action parameters here. This action parameters is only going to be available inside of this action block here. Okay, so I can click on action parameters, click on name, and now whatever name we pass into this action block, it's going to say it's done, you know, the name. Okay, so now I can press confirm, and now I can go out, I can edit my action, scroll down, and instead of displaying the snack bar here, I can delete it. I can delete this action, and what I can do is I can add a action block instead. So I can click on action block, and here I can pick the specific block that I want to display. In this case, we only have one block defined, and so I'm going to move it up. And now I can pass parameters to this action block. Okay, so let's say we want to pass name. And so here I'm going to say James, and that's going to pass James as the variable to this action block. And that way, when it runs, it's going to pull this action block and pass this parameter. And now instead of saying something like it's done or this or that, it's going to be a customized message. So let's go ahead and rerun the app now. Let's do an instant reload here. All right, so here's the app. Let's do that again. So we're going to wait until 10. And now it says it's done, James. And if you go back to the UI, if you click here, you see this action block here. And as you can see, it's also at the app level of scope. Okay, you can also create it at page level if you want, and you can create more of them. And so if you are noticing that you're always creating these couple of actions or a whole chain of actions, it's probably a good idea to reuse them. And you can also send parameters to them, and you can also get values back in case you need to do some calculations, you need to figure something out, and it can return some values that you can use wherever you plug this action block. Okay, so if you come over here, if you scroll down, we're using this action block, but this action block can also return something. Okay, and if you have some actions below it, it can take that return value and do something with it. And obviously, action blocks could be as complicated as you want. In our case, this action block is very simple. It just has one action, but they can be as simple or as complicated if you want. We can take this whole thing and create an action block out of it. And so wherever we need to display a status indicator, some kind of a progress bar or anything like that, we can send a parameter and say, well, we're creating an action. We can turn this into an action block and send it various parameters. So maybe we want to change the delay, or maybe we want to change how many iterations it's going to do before showing done, or anything else. We can easily send it various parameters and use this whole thing throughout our app instead of needing to rebuild it every single time. So a very, very useful feature that I definitely see myself using in my apps. Another really, really useful feature that is now available is called Firebase Query. And to demonstrate it, here I have a page. In this part, I have a list view that displays several users that I'm pulling from a backend Firebase, okay? And here you can actually search from this collection in order to find specific users that you want. And so as an example, I know I have James in there, so I can type James and I should be able to find James. In this case, I'm displaying the email that's associated with this user. I can also search for Jason, click on Jason Lee, click on search, and I just found Jason Lee's email here. I can do the same thing for Gina. Search and I find Gina Kim. Now, if we go back to our UI, what we're doing here is we have a new action that's attached to the search button. So if I select search, come over here, open it up. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a Firestore query, and that is something that you could not do before. That was not an action that was available to you. Before, you can typically create records, update records, or delete records. You could not do a query from an action. And so before, it was very, very cumbersome to attach a query directly to an action. You would have to do it using a bunch of other techniques. But now it's actually very, very simple, because all I'm doing is I'm executing this query. I'm taking the name and I'm searching whether display name is equal to whatever I entered here. And then if the user is found, I can display some kind of information about this user. So in this case, I'm displaying an email, and all you have to do is click here, and you have access to action outputs, right? In this case, we have search result. And so what I'm doing is I am pulling the first user and I'm displaying their email information. So as you can see, I'm pulling the first user and I'm just displaying their email information. I can also display some of the other fields related to the user as well. And so this is a really, really nice feature because now it's very trivial to create functionality in your app where you need to search on data from your database, on data that you're querying before, right? So for instance, here I'm querying this data, and here I can easily search it. Before, it was very, very cumbersome to do that. So this is a really, really cool feature, and it's a no-brainer to start using it in your apps. Now, while I was showing you this feature, you might have noticed that I'm using something called a conditional builder to display this field here, or to display an empty container. And that is because FlutterFlow has now released a new widget that you can start using called conditional builder. And the way this conditional builder works is that if you click on it, you have these property settings here. And so you can specify a condition here, and what you want to happen when that condition is true. Chiefly, you want to display something here. And so what happens here is that you have a condition, and if that condition is met, or if that condition is true, you will be able to display the children that are inside of this if condition, okay? If it's false, you're gonna be displaying the children inside this else condition here. And you can also click here, and you can do other conditions, right? So if the first condition is not met, but the second condition is met, you can do something. Otherwise, if no conditions were met, then you can do something here. Now, before this feature was implemented, the way that you can have this similar functionality is that you would need to take those two children widgets that you're going to be showing one or the other, and you would need to make them children of a stack. And once you make them children of a stack, you can use something called conditional visibility. So for each widget, you can set a condition. So, widget 1 will be shown if the condition is true, whereas widget 2 is going to be shown if the condition is false. And so this conditional builder does the exact same thing, except it's a lot more straightforward to do it. Using a stack is a little hacky. Not a lot of people know about it. And so if you wanted to implement that functionality, you had to learn that, you can use a stack to do it. And now you have a new feature that's self-explanatory, and it's going to be a lot simpler for beginners to get started and to have that functionality where they need to display, one widget or another widget or another widget, depending on a certain condition. And so this feature is definitely a no-brainer. But if you've been using that previous method by building a stack and having the stack have multiple children, you can continue to use that as well if you want. I personally do not know if I'm going to be using the conditional builder or I'm still going to be using that stack method, because I've been using that stack method for so long that it's pretty much ingrained in my mind by now. It's pretty much automatic for me to use it anytime I need this functionality. But I think for all beginners, they should be using this conditional builder from now on. Now, this next feature is actually a pretty interesting and a pretty powerful feature that gives you access to all kinds of new things that you can do with your FlutterFlow apps, okay? So here I have an app running, and on this page, I have a list of users here. If I add a new user, you can actually trigger a new action in your FlutterFlow app. So if I go back into Firestore, this is the users collection. These are the users document that I'm displaying here. And let's say I add a new user. So I'm going to add a new document here, and let's say the user's name is Mike, name Mike, let's say email is mike@mike.com. And once I press save, as you can see, we have an action triggered, new user added, And in this case, it's a snack bar, but it could be pretty much anything. You can do a redirect, you could do a navigate, you can display details, you can display a lot of interesting things. And so let me show you how it works. And so if you click on list view and you open our flow editor, there's a new setting that has been added and it's called on data change. So in this case, I'm only showing a snack bar that says new user added. And in fact, a more correct message would be users changed, because even if I remove a user, this thing is going to be still triggered. So if I come back here and let's say I delete Emily Johnson here, delete a document, and I go back to my app, you see that message is still displayed. And so this new feature is a major one, because now your app gets notified when the external data is changing. And so it's fairly trivial to figure out if a new user was added, new user was deleted. It's fairly trivial to figure out what exactly happened. The problem before was we had no way of being notified when that data changed. And now this mechanism is built in. And so you can build a lot of interesting apps. In fact, I've been thinking the entire morning today of different apps that I can build. And I have lots and lots of ideas that I want to share with you guys in some of the future videos. But let me know below if you have some interesting ideas that you can build now that you have an ability of being notified when the data changes. Now, the next feature that I want to show you is a very underrated feature, because it allows you to do things that were nearly impossible or very difficult to do before. And so here I am back into the app that I talked about in the previous example. I have my list view, I have my list view of users, and next to each user I have a button. And the idea here is that when I click on this button, we're going to be redirected to another page, and on that page I want to display some of the information having to do with the user that we click the button next to. Okay, so let's say I'm looking at Emily Johnson, I want to click on next. I am displaying some information having to do with Emily Johnson. Let's say I go back, let's say I'm seeing James at james.com. I click on next, and here I'm being displayed some of the information having to do with James at james.com. Now, this very simple functionality used to be very difficult and very painful to implement. And that is because I am not passing the reference of this user and then pulling it on the second page like people are used to doing. But what I'm really doing is I'm just passing the information that you're seeing on the screen. If you click on next here, I'm passing both James and James's email. If I click on next here, I'm passing not only Gina, but Gina and Gina's email as well. And so if we go back to the app, what I'm doing here is that when you click on this next, I am saving this information in an app state. So if we come over here, I'm updating the app state. And now you may be thinking to yourself, but how can you update both fields in an app state? Doesn't app state support just one field? And you may be right, but now we have a way of combining multiple fields into different types and then passing those types as we see fit. And so before, anytime you wanted to work with data, whether it's passing it, saving it, etc., apart from pulling it from a database, you really couldn't easily work with multiple fields. And when it came to app state or page state, you can typically work with one field at a time. But now, thanks to data types, you can create your own custom data type and populate it on the fly and then pull it up anywhere you want and display that information. So if you head over to data types, I have this person data type. And in this case, I'm only saving name and email, okay? I can have a lot more fields here, or I can just have one field if I want. But for the purpose of this tutorial, it's enough for me to just save name and email. And then when we go into app state, I created this person app state variable that's of type data person, which is that data type, okay? And so now we are no longer dealing with individual variables. We're dealing with a variable that contains these two variables in it. And so now if you click on this button, we open up the flow. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm creating a new person data object, and I'm saving those two variables that I need, specifically the name and the email. So here I am setting the value, and I'm creating this person, right? I'm creating this new data type on the fly, and I'm creating this new data type, and I'm assigning the email with the values that the button has access to when we click on the button. So as a result, we've just created this data type, or a complex type, because this is no longer a string or a number. It's a combination of multiple types. And so once we create this new data type, we save it into app state and then navigate to the other page. And on this new page, we can simply pull up that variable from app state and display the information in these fields on this page. Okay, so for instance, for person name, all I'm doing is I'm pulling up this app state person, and then I'm using this data structure field and I'm selecting name. And in this case, I'm doing the exact same thing, but I'm selecting email. And so this data types feature is definitely a game changer, because it allows you to pass complex data types as opposed to just being able to pass individual fields like you could do before. And so this is a feature that I'm definitely going to be using in my apps, and you should be too, if you need to pass complex data throughout your app. Now, if at this point you're thinking to yourself that you definitely are interested in using some of the things that I talked about in this video, but you're not yet sure how to use them correct, well, the best way to learn is through experience, and the best way to gain experience is by seeing how others are making use of these new features. And you can do that very, very easily by viewing and or cloning this app that I built in order to demonstrate some of the new FlutterFlow functionality. And you can easily do that from my Patreon page. And when you join our amazing Patreon community, not only will you get access to this app, but you'll get access to all the apps that I built on this channel. And that means you can easily view them and or clone them if you wish, change them around, or simply look and study how I leverage different features and functionality of FlutterFlow in order to build truly amazing and useful apps. We have a growing and a truly amazing Patreon community. And so if you're looking to better your NoCode, to learn how to build better apps faster, then you definitely owe it to yourself to check out our amazing community and become a member. You can learn more about our Patreon community using the link in the description below. And remember, above all, when you join our Patreon community, you're essentially supporting this channel and supporting my work, and that is greatly, greatly appreciated. Now, if you're looking for more FlutterFlow tips that I've covered in the past, I'm gonna have a video right there, and that is the video that you should definitely watch next if you're looking for more amazing tips and tricks when it comes to FlutterFlow.